Hi, I'm Charles. I run Kaleidoscope Rock Academy and Kaleidoscope School of Music here in the Seattle area. I've taught over 60,000 private lessons to students since 1991, and I work with teen and adult rock bands, and have done that since 2001. This is a video about 4 relatively quick tips about how to deal with modeling amps. In the last 15 years, I've owned a lot of different modeling processors and amps as part of keeping a fleet of amps ready for teen rock band players. Usually we have 3 in the band room at any given time. Sometimes they're all the same, sometimes they're different. It depends on what breaks first, but I've had every generation of the Line 6 Spider amp. I've had Pod 2.0, the King being shaped red preamps. I currently have a Pod Floorboard HD 500. I've had FloorPod Plus. So the one we're going to look at today in doing these 4 tips about how to deal with modeling amps is the Line 6 Spider 5, which I've had for a little while now. I've got the short board on the floor, and then my tester guitar is a customized Godin Telecaster that has Tom Anderson pickups, which are technically passive but can make it sound a lot like active pickups. So the reason why I say you have to deal with modeling amps leads to the first tip. Assume that all the presets that come with your modeling amplifier or preamp are garbage. Now that's a strong statement because actually it's not always true, but I'm trying to empower you to find your own sounds. Do not trust that a piece of gear comes preloaded with all the sounds that you would need or want just because it says it has all the bells and whistles or it gets great reviews. My proof for that is pretty much through the whole history of my rock band program. I have programmed every single sound that we've used in our rehearsals. I might start with a patch or preset that's on a particular device, but I never have used any of them as is. Now, of course, this puts the burden on you to try to figure out how to edit or change them, and I'll try to make that a little bit easier through some of the other tips in this video, but I guess it's kind of a guilty until proven innocent philosophy that if something, unless a preset proves to you that it's worth using, assume it's not. A lot of modeling gear, especially some of the lower end price tags, comes with patches that make you sound great in a music store when you're trying them out. So they're really brilliant, they're really over affected. They're not the type of thing that's really going to sound great in a mix or really loud in a band environment, because there's just too much of everything. So that's tip number 1, is just assume that you're going to have to toss out most of what it came with and look for the sounds that you really want. I'm really happy, for example, with how the Spider 5 sounds. I've read lots of negative reviews like, oh, I can't get the sounds I want out of this. But when I was forced to move up to this from a Spider 4 kicking a bucket, I went to Guitar Center and actually played with editing the Spider 5 for like 2 hours just to make sure I could get the sounds that I wanted out of it for my students. Tip 2 would be to basically strip off everything. So find a patch that you kind of like, or just a patch on that comes with your amp, and just strip it down. So I'm gonna A/B actually 2 different presets here to give you a sample of what I'm talking about. So this is 17B Another Thing. So I'm assuming they're thinking Another Thing Coming by Judas Priest. This is what it sounds like with this guitar. To me, that's really bright, but that's what the presets came with. So yeah, it's reasonably unaffected, but for me the EQ is really on the trebly side. By comparison, my metal sound so that was a patch that I made, and that's how different the EQ was on those 2. Well, let's go up and find one. There's one in here that's called Indie Solo. So I'm gonna go back and find that one, and I'm gonna like do tip 2, stripping down the sound and see what we get. Here's what it started as. It's pretty gnarly. So first off, with this amp, if you push the FX button, it changes all the knobs controlling effects. So I'm just going to move all the effects knobs to 0. So that's what, now it sounds like. it gives me a better idea of what the basic character is of the patch. So if I'm going to start editing, I need to know where I'm starting from, and too many effects make it really hard to hear that. So now I get more of a sense of what the actual amp model and the EQ sound like. I'm going to turn down reverb just a little bit. Yeah, I don't think you need to turn the reverb totally off, but again, there's usually too much on presets. So I'm kind of listening to that. I've got it down at about 20% now. That's a little too much. So I turn it back up a little bit. Now if I hit the amp button on this amp, it changes all these back to this white color, which means now I'm doing more typical preamp stuff. So I'm going to just take the treble down. One thing I've learned from years of having these things, even going back to some of the pre-modeling things like the ToneWorks Korg Pandora's box in the 90s, is that thing, man, I had like the treble on like minus 16 out of 16 on that. So I'm just going to turn down just the treble. To me, that's better already just from doing that modification. I'm going to leave it alone because I'm not going to criticize the basic amp model at this point. Now I can go back and maybe add a little bit of something here. Looks like I have delay here on the third knob. I'm realizing now in the high register it's still pretty bright, so I'm going to turn down the treble down even more. So that's what my indie solo sound ended up sounding like. Let's go back to the original for a second. So here's with my edits using the strip everything off principle. And I'm going to go back and just go back to the original. Now I'm realizing that I got rid of the phaser and didn't even realize I was doing that. I maybe stripped it down too much, but again, it gave me a thing to build from. If I go through that same process again, I'll try to do it fast. Turn the treble way down, looking at where I last had the knobs. Turn all of these off first, and then turn the reverb to where it was. Now I'm going to try to dial in a little bit of this phaser. Somewhere in that process, it went from being a phaser to a chorus, so I'd have to get into the actual screen part of this menu to fix that. Let's find another one and see if I can do the same process. So this says Wayward Son, so we know that's Carry On. Oh, wrong song. How does that song go? Yeah. Actually, that was not bad. Congratulations, line 6. I wouldn't probably change a whole lot on that one. So again, it's proven itself to me. Guilty of proven innocent. Okay, here's a good one. This one says Puppet Master, so we're supposed to play Metallica on this. It definitely has that kind of metal scooped mid sound, but I still feel like it's too bright. So I'm going to go in here and just kill the treble and see what we get. I like it better already. Let's turn the reverb all the way off. Whoops, that was the volume. Yeah, it's not going to do the reverb. So I'm going to put a little bit of reverb back in. I'm digging that. Works pretty well. So that's what I came up with. And if I go back to the original, to me that's just at like full band rehearsal volume, that would be just make your ears bleed. So that was a simple fix, but it worked. So tip number 3 is the Seagull. So this is a concept from, if you ever see like a 20 band graphic equalizer with all different sliders, all different frequencies, you can actually literally draw a seagull shape with those sliders. And that's one of the, instead of always setting everything flat, it's a better starting point if you don't know what to do with the EQ to start with the seagull shape instead of just totally flat. The way that translates to most amps that have a bass middle, treble, is you put the bass and treble at like 2/3 up, and you put the mid-range in like 1/3 up, and that draws like a Seagull with those 3 knobs. So I'm gonna find a amp model on here. Okay. So this one's Tom Sawyer, it says. If I do the Seagull with this one, this is what it sounds like, just by default. It also gives you an idea of the character of this particular modeling amp, because if the Seagull doesn't sound like the Seagull you expect, it might mean that the programming of your modeling amp is overcompensating. Like maybe it's got too much treble that's hard to dial out. So. That sounds pretty good. If I put it to the other concept of making everything straight up and down in the middle flat, it would be. To me, too much mid-range always sounds a little muddy. So if I dial out the mid-range again, to me there's just a slight greater bit of clarity there. And if I feel like I'm not getting enough brilliance, I can turn the treble back up. But I still have the clarity because the middle's down. Obviously, all of this stuff is subjective. Somebody might pull up any of these patches I've modified and say, that patch is my favorite thing. How can you do that? But I just think, whenever I approach a new amp, like a student brings in an amp I've never seen before, if it has 3 EQ knobs, I always go with the Seagull to start and then modify from there. It's just a great starting point. So that was tip 3. Tip 4 is think about what you need for a band. This is, of course, only really applicable if you're in a band or aiming to be in a band. But a lot of these things, like we said earlier, are designed to make you sound awesome when you're playing in your bedroom or at Guitar Center. They're not necessarily great at concert volume. So first thing would be to clean up the sounds like what we've been talking about and kind of balance the EQ more. But also be thinking about how good a particular product is for foot pedal control. For example, I love the FBV shortboard Mark II that I have here. I've got 2 of them, one for each of my Spider amps. I love the amount of control that you get out of these pedals because you can have multiple banks of 4 sounds, so 4 sounds without having to change banks, accessible from your feet, and then you have what I think is really the key thing, the add and subtract row. So you've got a second row that when you're on a preset, you can actually add a stomp, you can add a boost, you can add a modulation, you can add delay. You can take those things on and off without changing the preset or going to a different preset. A lot of pedals don't work this way. I really like Black Star amps, for example, but I feel like they've yet to release a pedal that gives you anywhere close to the kind of control you need on stage that the shortboard does. So that's why we're using Line 6. One of the main reasons why we're using Line 6 in Rock Band. Let me show you my performance patches that I have for bands, because I think the next part of this tip is have at your disposal some really good basic sounds for playing whatever variety of rock and roll you're playing. So what I do for the King rock groups here is I make sure that there's one bank 1, that has really basic solid sounds that they can use to build on. So like we've got a clean sound, a slightly grittier blues sound, rock sound number 1, rock sound number 2. And each of those is just an amp model that I chose with whatever EQ settings I chose, and just a tiny bit of reverb. And then each one of those, I'm using function 1 on the shortboard to give me a boost. So I want them to be able to get louder for their solos without having to fiddle with a knob or anything like that. That's probably the most important thing about playing in a band, is being able to boost your solos. And now with modeling amps and presets, it's a hell of a lot easier because you can add it to like any preset. If I go back to my clean setting, what I did here is I chose one particular modulation effect and one particular delay setting for each preset, and you dial that in on the amp, you save it with it engaged, and then with the floorboard you take it off, and then you save it again without the effects engaged. So what that means is then those effects are kind of in the patch, but they're not engaged, and you can engage them with your feet. So right now I've got my straightforward sound. If I add a little bit of chorus using my modulation button, that's my default chorus for my default clean sound in bank 1. I can add some delay. I can add both. If I'm playing a line that's getting buried, I can boost it. Make it a little bit louder. And I did that with each one of the presets here. It's like a nested bank of options. So it has the basic amp model, and then when you hit each one of the add or subtract buttons, you get a certain modulation, a certain delay. And I've got it set up so that like the rock ones go to flanger, the blues one goes to tremolo. I think the delays are all pretty similar, but I'm making sure that I have like really basic, straightforward sounds for playing in the band, much more important than all the bells and whistles. What I typically do, if there's a song that just has so many effects that I feel like it's going to take something special, I will copy this entire row from this bank into another bank, like bank 2, and then I will adjust each one of them a little bit to fit that song. Like for example, if you're playing Barracuda, you want the flanger on from the very beginning, so I might take my rock preset 1C, copy it to 2C up in the next bank, so it's in the same position where I'll remember where it is, but I add the flanger and save it that way, so the minute I engage it, it's got the flanger. But by using that same architecture of always having the cleaner sounds on the left and the dirtier sounds on the right, it helps me keep my brain organized and access more stuff from my feet without getting confused. Because really the point of all this gear should be to be ready to play with other people and have the sounds that you need. So that was tip 4, is think like you're in a band and set up your amp accordingly, and also buy the type of amp that's got options to enable you to do that. One of the things I really don't understand about a lot of these products, like, you know, the Spark amp is actually, I've got that over here by Positive Grid, it's pretty awesome, but it's really just kind of designed to be like a bedroom recording thing. Why not make it so it's got a really killer foot switch that enables you to access all the features? They haven't done it yet. I mentioned earlier Black Star, same deal. Like, I like Black Star's sounds a lot. I think they might sound more organic, really, when it comes down to it, than Line 6, but they don't really have a great foot pedal option that I'm aware of. Certainly nothing like the 2 rows of buttons on the shortboard here. So just reviewing those 4 tips, we're assuming that all of the presets in your modeling product are garbage unless they prove otherwise to you. Build your own presets, starting by stripping everything off, dialing back the treble, taking away the effects, and listening to what the core sound of each preset's like, and then building on that. 3rd, remember the Seagull when you're setting up an initial EQ for things. And 4th, think like you're in a band. I will be making some more amp-oriented videos, so check the channel for those. And thank you so much for watching. And if you like this kind of thing, please subscribe to us. Thanks.